Is there any danger around? Can I get a response from him? Tapping on his shoulders, Dad, can you hear me? Open your eyes if you can hear me. I would find it really hard to hear this advice at that age, but my real takeaway would be just take some time. Like, the world is in no rush. I am the Michael Bublé of Movember. You roll me out every November. Like, that's what I'm known as, Mr. Movember, to a lot of my mates. I joined him for 3 of them and got to the start of the 3rd one, and I could not feel my knees. And I was like, I can't afford to think about anything other than where my next foot goes, because I will fall over and hurt myself. Is this a helpful thought? Is this actually doing me any favors? If not, let that one go.
Fraser Macdonald Lister, thank you for coming on, my friend.
My pleasure. It's a real pleasure to be here. I've been keeping an eye on the podcast ever since Joe first showed it to me. Great to be here.
Could you start off by just telling everyone a bit about you and a bit about your story?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Fraser. I am a 9-year, I think, Movember ambassador now. And my involvement with Movember is mainly in the sphere of mental health, but we also cover prostate cancer and testicular cancer, which I'm sure we'll chat about. And I first got involved with the charity when I was at university. And I got involved with it just as a bit of a laugh with some friends who I played rugby with, and we wanted to raise a bit of money. But I think in my mind, my involvement with an organisation like that probably began quite a lot earlier. So to try and give a pre-seed version of the story, my dad very unfortunately passed away when I was 16, and it wasn't expected. He wasn't unwell. It was totally out of the blue. He went for a run. Ironically, he was getting fit to run the London 10K. He wanted to raise money himself for Evelina Children's Hospital, who saved my life when I was a child. And he went for a run and he collapsed, and a passerby found him in the road, and we were the nearest house. We lived in the middle of nowhere. Knocked on the door and said, my phone's out of charge. Can you please call emergency services? There's a man lying in the road. And my mum shouted upstairs to me and said, Fraser, can you go and check it out? Because I was a qualified first aider at the time with the Army cadets. Ran out into the road, look up the lane, and there's my dad lying in the middle of the road. So I went into sort of response mode and ran up to him, was very much in kind of first aider headspace, not son headspace, and Dr. ABC. Is there any danger around? Can I get a response from him? Tapping on his shoulders, Dad, can you hear me? Open your eyes if you can hear me. Checking his airways, checking his breathing, and there was nothing. And I think, if I'm honest, I knew that we lost him, but next step is perform CPR, so that's what I did. And I performed CPR for about 15 minutes until emergency services arrived, and they sort of said, you did everything you could. And it was 2 weeks before I was due to sit my GCSE exams. My dad had been a real proponent of academics for me. He had a really rough childhood, grew up in Glasgow, was abandoned in London by his parents, very much kind of self-schooled and night schooled his way to a job and stuff like that. He was a real grafter, and so had afforded me every opportunity I could. And I went into this headspace of, I'm now the man of the house, I'm an only child, I've lost my dad, it's just me and mum. I've got my exams in 2 weeks' time, which are the first ones that really determine the rest of my life. And God forbid, is this going to stop me? Because Dad would have hated to think that after all of the effort he'd put in, it was him that stopped me. And so it didn't stop me. I got on with my exams. I gave a rip-roaring eulogy at the I was going to say at the wedding. It was definitely not a wedding. At the funeral. I gave a great eulogy at the funeral, and very much gave everyone the impression that I was okay, and sat the exams, aced them, and was really, going in the right direction. The problem was, because of the external achievements I was having, people didn't think that there was anything wrong, and neither did I, to be honest. I was almost validating to myself that I had dealt with this. So I powered on through school, and it wasn't until a couple of years later, when actually I was struggling so much with my energy levels at school. I was taking a Pro Plus every period of the day, caffeine tablets to get through. And I went to the doctor and said, look, I'm so tired all the time. I can't sleep at night. I can only just get through my classes. Can you give me something? What is wrong with me? And they ran through a questionnaire about life that I thought was totally unrelated to my sleep. And then they pronounced me depressed. And that was not that long before I was due to go off to university. And I went off to university, and with this kind of new diagnosis, but also wanting to reinvent myself a bit and, no longer be the kid whose dad had died, because everybody at school kind of knew that about me. And I went to uni, and again, to try and cut what is a pretty long story short, I was studying at Oxford It was a very high pressure environment. I was trying to reinvent myself socially, keep on top of a very, very demanding academic schedule, continue being a rugby player. And it all got way too much. And the default coping mechanism in that environment was going out partying on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, maybe Saturday night too, if you've had a win on the weekend. And while everyone else kind of drank, partied and had a good time, I just went deeper and deeper into a hole of total self-deprecation. And within my first year at uni, I tried to take my own life twice. It wasn't until the second time that I actually told my mum, which was a really big deal. I had told the university services the first time round. And I had a therapist, but I wasn't really engaging with the help. I kind of felt like I was running rings around them. And yeah, it was terrible, really. And I'm now very comfortable talking about it, as you can tell. Yeah. But at the time, I was very confident talking about the fact that I lost my dad and when I was struggling, but I wasn't comfortable talking about the fact that I was having suicidal ideation, or that had then progressed to having a plan, or that had then progressed to trying to take my own life. And I think what's really happened and why I'm involved with Movember is that during the period of time that I was recovering from that, Movember happened to come around. It wasn't sort of a plan. And I just did it because it was fun, but it created quite an easy platform for me to talk to my mates about my mental health and be like, it's been really, really bad. And then the following year, maybe it was the inner management consultant in me, I looked at it and went, we raised £1,000 last year. If someone kind of took the reins on this, we could probably do something quite big. So I applied to be the university's ambassador for the charity. That year, I raised the most money of any student in the UK. I did the same thing again the next year. I then graduated, got a job in the city, became the ambassador to the company. And within 3 years, we topped the European fundraising leaderboards as well. And then in the last 3 years, I decided to combine my loves for rugby and Movember and found Mo Rugby so that we could create a club for people who'd raised lots of money for the charity or who cared about the charity. So we've had 2 to 3 years of men's rugby there, and then this year introduced a women's team, which has been amazing. And yeah, it just kind of keeps going up and up. I try to do more stuff like this now, more talking and advocacy and awareness, but than focusing purely on the money side of things. But both are important because, as I'm sure we'll talk about, the money really does help. You know, ultimately it's the money that funds things like the campaign where you see a moustache on a bus or a moustache on a billboard and then you think to talk to a friend. It's the money that makes the campaign that made me want to sign up, that made me start talking to my friends about things. So yeah, that's a bit of a brief history.
Incredible story.
Awesome, mate.
Incredible story. I want to take it back to when you were 16 and you did lose your dad. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to your younger self at that sort of GCSE stage and going through things? There might be someone listening to this who's in a similar situation.
Yeah. I find that really difficult to do. And I have spoken to people since. Sadly, since I've finished school and while I was at university, I had the school get in touch with me and say, we've had another student lose a parent. Can you talk to them? I think I would find it really hard to hear this advice at that age, but my real takeaway would be just take some time. Like, the world is in no rush. Your exams are in no rush. I look back on it and I go, would I have still done well in my exams had I taken, a year out or even a month out, just not sat them, done them the next year? Would it have impacted my results? Maybe a bit, but definitely not in a way that would have drastically changed, the course of my life. I didn't take any time. I didn't take time to grieve. I didn't really understand what grieving was, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I don't think that anyone around me, whether they were adult or peer, knew how to talk to me about it. So I did what I do best, which is doing things. I mean, as you can kind of tell, like I busy myself with things. It's as much my coping mechanism as my favorite thing to do. So it's kind of, I would say to someone, just take some time. It's difficult to say whether I wish I had. I feel like I definitely would have benefited from it. I would have found it impossible to hear. I mean, a lot of people did say to me, look, don't worry about the exams. Just take some time out of school, go on holiday, do whatever you need to do. And I was not interested in hearing it, but with the benefit of hindsight, that would be my advice.
If I take you back to the sort of 16-year-old you, all the way through to 18 to the university, and you said that people didn't ask you if you're okay or challenge that? Do you think they did and you just weren't hearing it? Or,
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
I think that, there are certain figures that stand out as having challenged me on it, but I do also think that I feel, and this is just my perspective, but that the way that we talk about mental health has progressed hugely in just the last 10 years.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
And we're talking, I'm 26 now, so we're talking 2014 when I lost my dad, 2016 when I finished school. Like, mental health wasn't something that we received assemblies on when I was at school, and it wasn't even that long ago, whereas now they do. So with my peers, they were intelligent chaps, and they were very forthright with saying, look, we don't understand this, we've not been through this, but we're here. And then there were particular members of staff at the school who were really, they cared about me and my well-being, and they would ask me what I needed a lot of the time, and I didn't really know. So there would be an element of people asking and me not knowing how to respond, but I think there was also an element of people not knowing how to talk to a high-performing 16-year-old who was also going through something that difficult. And I don't think that that's necessarily a sign of the times either. I mean, in the workplace, there's a real thing around high-performance individuals versus struggling with well-being. I've seen the same thing happen at work with adults. So I think, both sides of that for sure.
My sister was at Oxford, insanely high pressure environment. Workload was massive. That was me just looking from the outside in. My friend's been at Oxford. I've talked to him. He said a lot of people there are struggling with their mental health, are more just like struggling with the pressures of the academics, timeline, trying to socialize, trying to do sport. You said that uni was kind of like the tipping point for you. A lot of people listening to this are the younger generation who still are at university. Again, like I said, on the point of school and that younger you, in terms of balancing uni better, what advice would you kind of give there? A very hard one, depending on place as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's the thing that jumps out to me instinctively is a general thing, which I just would have said, just can the drinking. And I know that sounds,
people say that. Yeah.
I know that sounds oversimplified, but I know that my mental health wouldn't have got to the place it had got to if I wasn't drinking as much as I was. Because I think it wasn't, yes, the environment is a pressure cooker. Oxford, Cambridge, other universities like that, it is wild. You're looking at 2,000 word essays a week, and then sitting down one-to-one with someone who's an absolute expert in their field and trying to stand up for yourself, quite often on a hangover, and then finishing that and going to a lecture where you're being talked to by Dawkins' ex-wife, and it's just a bit of a joke at times. But I know that all of the times where my mental health was at its worst was when I was either hungover as a result of drinking or drinking as a result of feeling down. Both of the times I tried to take my own life, I wasn't sober. And all of the things that I did, ways in which I acted out, relationships that broke down while I was at university, happened as a result of things that happened when I was drinking. Because I wasn't, in my eyes at least, I wouldn't say I was a bad boozer, kind of quote unquote. That was definitely a phrase that went around at uni. He's a good boozer, he's a bad boozer. I could be great fun when I was out on the drink.
Yeah.
I'd dance all night. I have some phenomenal stories of escapades and tomfoolery, and then I've got some really awful stories. And I think it's taken me another sort of 5 years after I've graduated to get my own head around the fact that it's not that I'm a good or a bad person. I just have a bit of a range when it comes to where I'm at when I'm drinking. I'm actually 75 days off of drinking as of today, and I think I'm probably done.
I was about to ask you how you manage that.
Yeah.
To socializing.
I don't. I couldn't. Right. Like I am not a moderation person in anything. If I'm doing,
Sounds like me.
If I'm doing work, I'm all in. If I'm doing Movember stuff, I'm not doing one podcast. I'm doing 3 in a week. If I'm drinking, I'm not having 2 pints, I'm having 10. And I strongly admire people who can have a couple of pints and then put it down, but I'm just not that person.
Yeah.
And it was actually after this year of summer sevens, taking Mo Rugby around and about, where we got back from Copenhagen, where we'd played in the Copenhagen Sevens. And everyone had seemed to have a brilliant time, and I just hadn't. And I looked back on it and I went, the reason I didn't have a great time was because I was either drunk or hungover the whole weekend. I didn't play my best rugby. I didn't manage the team as best as I could have done. and I didn't get the most out of the experience. And I just went, it wasn't even like I was reprimanding myself for having done anything wrong. I just went, that was a total waste of time. Mm-hmm. I want to see if I can have as much fun without drinking.
Without that.
And it's working better for me. And I'm not suggesting to a student that they don't drink, because it's not possible. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. It is impossible for most social sports playing people to get through university without going and drinking. But I think recognize when you're on that slippery slope of the difference between I'm going out because I want to go and have fun versus I want to go and get drunk tonight. And I spent a lot of my university years in the space of I'm drinking to forget things about myself. I think that was an Ed Sheeran quote from UNI, which is about uni. So there you go. And I wanted to go and get drunk, not because it would mean I had more fun or because it made me better at talking to people, because it didn't. Like, I'm an extrovert. I'm perfectly comfortable going into a room sober. It was because I wanted to just black out and escape. And that's dangerous for anyone. And I think recognizing that you're in that headspace is really important. And if you've got a friend who's in that headspace, checking them. Because I got checked by my friends on several occasions, who unfortunately, because of how bad a state I was in, aren't really my friends anymore. And at the time, I looked at it and went, well, they're not very good friends. You know, they're kind of abandoning me in my hour of need. And now I look back on it with total sympathy for them. And I go, they were doing everything they could.
Tried.
They were doing everything they could to try, and they saw where I was going. And not in terms of, you know, suicide and stuff, but just in terms of they saw repeated instances of me being low, me struggling, and then me dealing with it by going out and getting more drunk. And they sort of, I remember one person in particular said, you've got to stop doing this. And I tried at various points in time, but I also think there's just something about growing up, right? Like, it's taken me until 26 to genuinely be comfortable with the fact that I'm not my best self when I'm on the booze, and it's not good for my mental health. And a lot of people say, do you feel better now, you know, a couple of months off of drinking? Like, no, not really. It's not like some magic pill. It's not like I've suddenly woken up as, I don't know, Coach Pratt or Fergus Crawley, and suddenly I can climb mountains for fun and do burpees in my sleep. Like, what I've had is 2 months where I haven't woken up with a hangover. I haven't sent a drunk text. I haven't got in a drunken fight with a friend over nothing. So rather than it being that it's improved my overall well-being, it has reduced the occasions that put me down. And I think that when I was already in that high pressure environment at uni, I wasn't just battling with the deadlines or the academic pressure. I was battling with my own hangovers and with myself. And that didn't help.
It's interesting you said it a second ago about the growing up piece, which I actually think that's what makes it harder to give advice to younger people, because they have to go through some of these things to get to where they are now. That's what I find. If I'm ever asked to go and speak to a younger person, you're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place, because you almost got to go through those things to get out the other side and learn from those things. You can't tell them something they don't want to hear.
A lot of people don't want to take advice as well.
Not really. Like,
the reason Joe and I talk about this all the time about, you know, what you've gone through, what I've gone through, what Joe's gone through. Like, if you would do it again, like, are you happy that you've kind of gone through it in a way? Happy's a wrong word, but now I've learned, and I've had those experiences, and I've had my foot in the fire, and like with my mental health, I completely understand. And I feel like it's hard to explain to someone who hasn't been in that state of, you know, incredibly depressed or is struggling with anxiety, because to them it's like, or just don't be sad. It's like mate, honestly, like, we're quite tough guys. Like, this brought me to my knees with me completely. I found rugby was a massive out for me, like, in terms of my mental health, helped me massively with my mental health. And I think Joe the same. The bit I wanted to get on here was rugby's quite like a alcohol induced sport. Everyone loves to drink. You got some proper drinkers on these rugby teams. Joe's talked about Reed's Weybridge before, and they know Joe doesn't drink or drinks very limited, and they're like completely cool with him. They're like, don't worry about it. I found it hard in rugby environments where, like, one week I'd drink and I'd almost fuel the fire, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you know, I'd be in a really bad mental state, and it'd come back to Saturday and they'd be like, I'm not
time
drinking.
To go
again. Or like, time to go again. Or I'd be like, I'm not going to drink this weekend. They'd all be like, oh, you pussy. Like, and then you're like in this state of, I don't really know what to do here. If you're in a rugby environment, which is quite heavily alcohol involved, what would you kind of say to that? Because Joe has really good advice on this as well. Like, what would you say to that person? Like, would you just go and be honest with them? Just be like, listen, I'm not drinking. This is why. Or would you just try and take yourself away from that environment?
I wouldn't take yourself away from it. I think that isolation is the absolute best friend of depression. And I have found I've had different experiences with not drinking around a rugby environment, because I had periods at uni where I didn't drink. At my last club, which was Battersea Ironsides, I had periods of time where I didn't drink, and I'm now playing at Richmond and now I don't really drink. I think there's a couple of things to bear in mind. One is just that the growing up angle comes into it a bit. I don't really think that I would say that any one particular club was better or worse for drinking than others. Every club I've been to, there are people who love drinking, and every club I've been to, there are people who don't drink. I think that the extent to which you get the response of, oh no, go on, just have one. I haven't had that at Richmond. I don't think that that's because Richmond's a better rugby club for well-being than Battersea Ironsides. I just think that I've gone from an environment where most of the guys I was playing with, including me, were between 21 and 25, and I'm now in an environment where most of the guys I'm playing with are between 25 and 35. So they get it. I think that the other thing is only explain as far as people ask, because you don't really owe anyone an explanation, and half the time they don't even really need it. Like when I first went into this mindset and this sort of experiment, really is what I'd call it. I'd call it an experiment. It wasn't a case of I've decided I'm going to stop drinking. I wonder what will happen if I don't drink at rugby on Saturday. One godsend is Guinness Zero, because you look like you're fitting in. So please sponsor me, Guinness Zero. I imbibe your beverages in quantity. So there's that. There's just kind of, most people won't even notice you're not drinking unless you tell them.
It's true.
Is one thing. And then the other one is, it's how you talk about it. I think the more that you kind of go, I think I'm stopping drinking, or I think I'm giving up drinking, or I found that people associate that with something must have gone wrong. Whereas when I just say, I just don't fancy a drink today, it's a day by day thing for me. So if I just go, I don't really drink that much anymore, or I don't really fancy it today, or I've actually got plans later and I can't afford to turn up drunk, people tend not to ask any more questions. When people do ask, because some of them genuinely, because they know about they know me as a Movember ambassador and a mental health person, they will say, is that a mental health thing? Is it a fitness thing? And I'll go, it's a bit of everything really, but I'm just trying it out. It doesn't get much more deep than that. Sometimes I'll say what I said to you. I came back from Copenhagen, felt like I totally wasted a holiday, and so thought I'd see how much fun I can have off the booze. But generally speaking, as long as I can still do all the things that I used to do when I was on the drink, everyone's fine. Yeah. And that has taken me a bit of time. The first month or so, I got to hit like a 9 p.m. wall, where when you finish a game at sort of 4, pile into the showers and skip shower beers, and then pile into the post-match feed and skip post-match feed beers, and then you do man of the match and dick of the day with a non-alcoholic pint, and then it gets into the part of the evening in that weird sort of doldrums between going out and leaving the club, where all anyone is doing is drinking to get drunk. At that point, I started to find it really difficult. But I have found that if I'm a bit strategic about it, I can go until 2 a.m. I tend to just start a bit later, sort of. If it's a social event that starts at 9, it's golden. If it starts at midday, then I'm going to be a bit bored by 9. But broadly speaking, as long as there's an activity on, I can go and dance all night sober quite happily. Yeah. Most of my mates wouldn't go anywhere near a dance floor without being 10 pints in. I'm very much the other way around. And so as long as there's like an activity, I'm having a great time. And if I'm having a great time, no one even notices I'm not drinking.
Yeah,
it's true.
I completely agree. I'm kind of the same, where you're just first on the dance floor and everyone's like, you must be battered. You're like, nah, just feeling good.
I just throw shapes.
Yeah, I'm just going shapes. Just don't mind me. Leave me be. I'm on my...
For me, it was really as well, I should say this, it was when I was in Copenhagen, part of the reason that turned things around was there were 2 people who came on tour with us who don't drink. One of our Mo sisters and one of our Mo bros, who for very different reasons, neither of them drink. And they both had probably the most fun, or it seemed to me that way anyway. Like they were out with us until midnight, and after midnight I couldn't remember what happened anyway, so it doesn't matter whether they were there or not. But then they were up at 8 a.m. going and exploring the city
because they could.
Yeah. And then recanting to me everything I'd done the night before. I was like, please stop. But I genuinely came home and thought, I want to be like that. I want to be able to be out all night and then get up in the morning and still do all the things I want to do. Yeah. And I know exactly what the thing is that's stopping me. And I've spoken to them both about it since, and they've just gone, yeah, it's like a cheat code, isn't it? It's like, yeah, it really is. So it doesn't have to be some sort of life-changing decision. And I do still get shit from my mates, particularly my friends back home. I've got a particular friend who is one of my best mates, so he won't mind me saying this, but he does send me at least a daily reel on Instagram of something to do with drinking or something to do with the fact that I'm not drinking makes me X, Y, or Z. But he does it in jest, and I think he's testing me. But I just said to him, I said, it's just because you're scared that I'm going to be able to tell you what you did. And he goes, yeah, please don't. But broadly speaking, nobody cares. Yeah. No one cares that you don't drink. If they do, it might genuinely, based on the people I've gone through so far, they're either people over the age of 60 who just don't understand the concept of going to a pub without having a drink, or they're people who aren't that comfortable in social situations without it and so feel weird about them drinking while you don't. And on the whole, other than maybe 3 or 4 people, literally everyone's been totally grand. Even going on dates. I've gone on dates. I mean, the dates haven't been that successful, but not because of the drinking. You know, they've said, oh, do you not fancy a drink? And I go, I just don't really drink. And they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, no worries. If they're comfortable in that, they'll have a glass of wine. And if they're not, then we're probably not going to work out anyway, are we? But it doesn't have to be a problem if you're surrounded by the right people.
Nice. I love that.
Can't argue that.
I want to stay on the topic of rugby as well, because rugby is something that's helped me massively. I know it's helped Joe massively as well. What has rugby done for you in your life?
So rugby's both helped me and hindered me, if I'm honest. And I think that my well-being has always been quite tightly tied up with rugby, not always for the right reasons. So I'm definitely someone who, when I find a cause or a pursuit or something I'm interested in, it defines me quite quickly. You know, I am the Michael Bublé of Movember. You roll me out every November. Like, that's what I'm known as, Mr. Movember, to a lot of my mates. When I first started playing rugby at secondary school, I didn't play prior to secondary school. It wasn't done at my primary school. Primary school, it was all about football, and I desperately wanted to be a good footballer, but I've got 2 left feet, and so I didn't fit in and was bullied a bit because of it. And so when I went to secondary school and they said, now you have to play rugby, it's not optional, I went, right, well, that's not happening again. I'm going to get good at this. And I went from whatever it was, the F team to the B team to the senior second team, still never quite making the top rung, still getting a bit bullied about it, you know, but doing my best. And then when I went to uni, it was again, I was like, I can still get better at this. And I played for my college, and then I played for the uni 3rd team, and then I played for the 2nd team. And then I finished uni, I was like, I can still get better at this. And I went to Battersea and I played for the 3s and then for the 2s. And then I moved to Richmond, which play at a slightly different level. And I've played for the 4s, the 3s and the 2s. And it's like, it's always been a personal development thing for me, but that has brought along with it a lot of self-doubt, a lot of self-criticism. Even though I'm playing amateur rugby, you know, if I'm not on a team sheet, I am anxious until I've seen a team sheet. Even now on a Thursday night, I am anxious until I've seen it. Yeah. Have I been picked? Am I good enough? Do they want me? You know,
that used to be the worst bit for me, that wait for the team sheet.
It is for me.
Yeah.
Where do you think it comes from, out of curiosity?
I think that just that childhood trauma of getting bullied for not being good at sport, probably. My whole life, it's been a battle for me. Like, I'm not a naturally gifted sports person.
It's also because you found academia so not so easy, but you took to academia so well.
But you know what people who are good at sport hate?
People that are smart.
People that are smart.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was treading this line at school. When I was at secondary school, prior to Dad passing away, I really, not that long before he passed away, I went through a period of time where I just seemed to be losing friends left, right and centre. And my mum said that she spoke to one of my friend's mums, and that the friend's mum said, I just think that he's a little bit ahead of the other guys in terms of maturity. And I said, that doesn't make sense. I was like, they're all cooler than me. Like, they're all better at sport than me. They all talk to the girls more than I do. Like, how can I be more mature than them? How can this possibly be the reason why they don't want to be around me? And my mum was like, you'll figure it out one day. And I do look back on it now and I go, I was growing up quickly anyway. And then when Dad passed away, I went through this whole weird period of time where everyone who wasn't my friend suddenly was, and it all got very confusing. But I think from a young age, I've associated self-worth with my just capability at things. You know, if I've chosen I'm going to play rugby, I've got to be good enough at it to hold my own in a room full of good rugby players. And yeah, so that's kind of been a bit of a negative side of it. I think the most positive thing for me about rugby, and I think it goes for all sports, I'm a real proponent for sports in general, is wherever I have lived, I have found a community because of rugby. Yeah. So when I went to university, when I didn't know who my people were, and I was in a big, small fish in a big pond, having been a big fish in a small one, joining the college rugby team was my immediate way of meeting some people that I knew at some base level I'd get on with. And then when I moved to London, which was another big transition, probably as big for me as moving from home to uni was really. Again, it was, okay, need to find a rugby club. Like, that's how I find my people. Not many of my friends had got grad jobs at that point in time. And so I had my work friends that I'd gone through the analyst program with, and then that was it. So joined a rugby club. And now living in Richmond, moved to Richmond a year ago, joined the club when I moved. And in that year, I have built my tribe, my community. And I think that there is something really important about having that group of people. I find it through sport. Some people find it through other things, but rugby in particular, you will always be welcome. We've got some guys in our squad who are brand new to rugby. We've got some guys who aren't, but just don't know how to chase an egg. Got some people who are phenomenal and, have played at semi-pro levels and then have slowed down a bit. And over the course of the last, I don't know, even 2 months since the season began, whether they were someone who came in new, someone who came in and just wasn't very good, or someone who came in and was great, as long as they were a nice person and they were up for a chat before and after training, they're your friend. And I hope that people can find that in other sports too. I don't know if they can. Yeah. But that's always been the biggest thing about rugby for me. It's been grounding me. I would have been totally lost in the city without a rugby club to play for. And that's part of the reason why I built Mo Rugby. We built it during lockdown because everyone who was playing rugby pre-COVID, what could you do? You couldn't see anyone. You couldn't talk to anyone. I was going mad, trying to pass a rugby ball against the wall. It's like that Simpsons meme of the kid throwing himself the frisbee. Like, I needed that community back. And so what we did is we took the top fundraisers, the top fundraising clubs for Movember, invited them and said, when this is all over, we're putting together an invitational team of top fundraisers. Do you want to be involved? And 3 years later, that's ended up with, 300 players on the books, 100 played this year, at least 50 different clubs represented, at least 5 different countries. We're now a virtual community, but who meet up once a month. We do a first Friday now. Awesome. The next first Friday is the 1st of Movember. You're both welcome to come if you're around. And we just invite people are traveling from down on the southwest coast. For the Mo match, we've got people coming from Aberdeen, because we've created a community, and within that community, people are looking after each other now. One of our players, won't mind me referencing him, he lost his brother to a murder 2 years ago, and has been going through the motions of the trials and the tribulations and the court process and stuff. And every now and again, he's kind of put a message on the group chat with 175 people in it and just gone, having a really crap day here, boys. And recently, the final sentencing happened, and it's finally been put to bed after 2 years. And he put a big message in the chat and just said, just wanted to say, there are people in here who have really helped me, and I wouldn't have met you without playing for this rugby club. That's awesome. And thank you. And let's have some fun this Movember. And I think that any rugby club can offer you that if that's what you give to it. If you're a guy who turns up and just wants to train and play, and that's it for you, then great. Do you. But it can be the sort of place where if you put some heart and soul into it, you can get that kind of community.
That must do a lot for you, seeing messages like that come up on the group, knowing that not that you're the reason for that happened, but if it wasn't for you, that might not have been the case.
I'm particularly bad at taking that kind of stuff in. I think if there's one thing I focus on in therapy, it's how do I appreciate the compliments or the kudos. It washes over me. So no, if I'm honest, but it's nice to see. I might not be proud of myself around it, but I am glad to see that this community is helping people. And I do hope that at some point, maybe when I stop for long enough to kind of breathe and absorb, that I'll look back and go, we did something really cool here, but we're only just getting started. So
even in the short window, I'm trying to sort of get you to blow smoke up your ass, which I know you won't do, but even that short window with all the messages and all the difference that you made, you still can't.
No, it's weird. I'm a bit immune to it.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's a coping mechanism or whether it's I think that my relationship with emotions has been very difficult since Dad died. I think I really did, like, because I can remember very, very clearly, like, the scenario of losing him.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to sound really strange and prophetic, but it was in April, and we, shout out Kent County Council, fill your potholes. There was a big pothole about 5 meters away from where Dad had collapsed.
Yeah.
And this chaos scene was unfolding. Right? My dad's on the floor. My mum had called his best friend to come to the scene when it was happening because we needed a man. The ambulance has pulled up. You know, my dad's best mate is shouting at him, like, my dad's dead, but he's shouting at him going like, wake up, James, don't give up on us. Come on, James. My mum's just in floods of tears. And I've gone into some sort of like zombie state at this point. And I've wandered over to this pothole and it's full of water, and I've looked at myself and I've seen my reflection, and I've gone, this is you now. You buckle up. Like, you need to take control of this situation. And I think probably a lot prior to that point, it's always been a part of my personality, but definitely since losing my dad, I require control of situations. Mm-hmm. Partly because I do genuinely, selfishly believe I can execute them better than most people, but also because the fear of it not going right when I could have done something.
Right.
And that probably stems from that, you know, I did everything I could, but I couldn't save my dad. But since then, anything that I've had some influence over, I've been really keen to. And I think that has dulled me from a lot of emotions, which I'm actively trying to do something about.
That was my next question.
Yeah. I've gone through, you know, periods of time in therapy, and I think that therapy is a brilliant thing to do. And I think that for me, I needed to take a break. Like, I did a good 3-year chunk, which helped me work through a lot of guilt and stuff around myself at uni, because I had a lot of guilt around that and the kind of person that I became when I was drunk. And now I'm more in a headspace of, okay, I'm now looking a bit more future focused. How can I start to appreciate, you know, the things I'm doing? How do I be a bit kinder to myself? And I went through a bit of therapy not too long ago, and then I'm taking another break. I need to get back into it. But, you know, I presume that both of you have probably sought a therapist at some point or another.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yes.
It's exhausting. It's time consuming. It's hard work. You know, it is the mind gym, right? Mm-hmm. And turning up's the hardest part. And I think I probably need to get back into it in the same way that I could probably do with getting back in the squat rack. But there's a lot on. But I think the best thing is that I know that it's a problem and I can articulate it, which is better than most.
And you know where it is.
And I'd love to get to a point where, you know, I envision when people, I think they talk about, you know, what do you envision for the future? What do you want to have built? What do you want to have achieved? I think that I'm fairly comfortable that I'll have got somewhere and achieved some stuff. What I want is to be in a position where whatever it is I've done, I'm happy about it, you know, content with it. Because I'm just never content. I'm always next job. And I think a lot of men are like that. I think, you know, we're conditioned into a breadwinner complex and a must do better complex. And, you know, the next man next to me is, well, I mean, this goes for men and women. You know, the next person next to me on social media is doing better.
Yeah.
I'd like to get to that point of what I've done's pretty good, actually. And I am trying to listen to people because they are telling me that.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things, what you were saying then about like constantly what's the next thing, we've talked about this before. I do that with everything. I really struggle with like people giving me sympathy with things, being like, oh, this is amazing, you've done really well. I'm always like,
don't care.
Oh, what? Yeah. Like, I need to push on to what's next.
Yeah.
And I find that really hard still, and I can't figure it out. But one of my things is I'll set a goal and I'll achieve that goal. And then as soon as I achieve the goal that I think was going to make me really happy, I maybe have 10 seconds of happiness. And then I'm like,
next
oh,
goal.
but I need to go to the next one. And it's like a never ending cycle, which I actually really struggle with. And that's one of my main problems I'm going through at the moment is that. And I feel like, as you said, you're quite similar. Have you learned anything yet where you've been like, oh, this works a bit better? Or because I literally have zero clue when it comes to this. I can't figure it out.
I'm definitely picking things up as I go. It's funny that you should say that because it reminds me of my dad. Because of my dad's childhood and his kind of the lack of love that he experienced and the abandonment and the hard work he had to put in, my dad became a massive perfectionist. kind of diagnosed with a mild form of obsessive compulsive disorder, and a very anxious bloke. Put off having me for years because he was worried he wouldn't be a particularly good dad, which he was a phenomenal one for all of 16 years. And I'll never forget that he said to me, you know, people ask, what advice did your dad give you that you remember? One of them was always, he said, please, for the love of God, set the bar a bit lower. He goes, you are like me. You are setting the bar there. You're setting it a little bit above what everybody else does. But even when you get to it, you don't care. He said, I can see you doing it at school. He's like, you're in a school where there's 120 people in your year group. He goes, you want to be in the top 10. Mm. He's like, I get that. But believe you me, in the grand scheme of life, if you're even in the top 25%, even the top half, you'll be doing great. And you have to believe me. And I was like, I don't believe you. He was like, right, well, one day, one day you'll understand. And I'm still like that. I'm still a bar setter. And certain things have helped me at certain points. I wouldn't say that I've had any fix-alls. I think slowing down is the thing I find hardest, and it seems to fix a lot of things. So one thing I did when I started stopping drinking was I made a real effort at journaling. One of my friends that I play rugby with, a women's rugby player who plays for London Broncos Rugby League, is a real proponent of journaling. And I was like, I've tried it loads of times and I hate it. So I write something down and I go, that's stupid. Or I write a page and then I go, I'm embarrassed about that now, and I've ripped the page out. Or I do 6 months worth of journaling, and then I come back to it and I go, God, that is all soppy, and I burned the page. You know, I've got so many notebooks with half the notebook ripped out. And I went, okay, I'm just gonna write stuff, see what happens. And I found that helped me. It's all about grounding for me, grounding where you are in the moment and stopping looking forwards. So the journaling helped me ground myself a little bit. I haven't written in it in like a month now. I've actually brought it with me, and I told myself that I'd do one after this. That really helped me. Not journaling with any expectation, not following some sort of method, just like putting pen to paper and getting some of my inner monologue out there helped me ground myself a bit. So there was that. There's then just generally slowing down. People come up with lots of different ways of doing this. I saw that you had Jamie Clements on around breathwork.
So good.
Legend.
The man's a genius.
Yeah.
I met him in a pub. I actually think around Movember time, a few years ago. Lovely guy. I struggle subscribing to things like doing breathwork regularly. If I'm honest,
yeah,
like I love the concept,
Of it,
same as us.
I can't.
but I can't get into a habit or a routine of doing it. But it's weird. One of my coaches, another Mobro called Owen Jones, coaches the Norwegian Sevens team and also coaches the Mobros. He always did this thing whenever we came in for a huddle at halftime and pre-match for Sevens, where before we said anything, it was deep breath in, deep breath out, deep breath in, deep breath out, deep breath in, hold it, deep breath out. Now we'll do what's the one good thing that's going on and the one thing we need to work on. And I have taken that approach into so much of life because you just never stop. And I think it's impossible to take stock and to stop setting the bar higher unless you stop. Some of the best times I've had for feeling good about myself have been when if I've taken like a week off work and I've gone on a trip or a holiday where I am not doing any admin, which is really uncommon for me. Like usually I'm on holiday, I'm still on my laptop. I'm not doing work for business. I'm doing Movember stuff usually, but I'm always on. If I've gone on a trip where I'm hiking, love hiking, going to the Highlands, going down to Dartmoor. If I'm doing something where I'm tech off for a few days, I very quickly get to a point of like, whether I'm on top of Ben Nevis or I'm standing on top of a tor, wind and rain's absolutely battering me in the face. And I'll be like, everything's okay. Everything is fine. And it is mad that taking some time, connecting with nature, writing down your thoughts, all of the stereotypical stuff, annoyingly, they're stereotypical stuff because they do work. The hardest thing is stopping. And I guess that comes back to the message at the beginning. Like, if I could urge people to figure out how the hell to stop. We're all moving so fast. I don't know how to do it. I'm, put the brakes on every now and again, but then I'm off. And even when I've got the handbrake on, the wheels are still spinning. I'm like stopping myself. But the more that you can stop, the more that you can take stock of where you are and the more that you can appreciate what you've got and not feel the need to set the next bar.
So how are you when you're at home, Richmond, phones off, laptops away, you're not journaling? How are you in your own head, in your own company? Just you in a room on your own?
Busy. always thinking about other people, other things. And I think because I still have depression and clinical depression, so depression that's lasted a long period of time and persists. I think that it's why I go from hyperproductive high to got nothing left low. I mean, I've had a conversation with people at work this week where they'll go, how are you doing? And I make a real effort, no matter what's going on, to always tell the truth when people ask me how I'm doing, which people find quite. I'm finding that people find it surprising when you tell them how you actually are. If I join a work call and someone goes, "Oh, how's your day going?" I'll be like, "Really tough. Like, I'm not good right now," and they'll be like, "Oh."
They're expecting a fine.
Okay.
How's yours? Yeah.
And it's funny actually, because every time they'll then message me after the call and go, "Do you want to check in?" But people aren't used to people actually saying, "Yeah, I'm struggling right now." And this week has been terrible for me. We had a bit of difficulty with one of the fundraising matches that we're organising for this year with Movember, and it put me in a bit of a headspin. And very quickly, my kind of triangle of things that keeps me going, which are eating, sleeping, and doing exercise, all went out the window. I'd be up till 3-4 in the morning not sleeping. I'd then be getting up late, skipping breakfast. Meals went out of whack. Made it to training on Tuesday. Got to last night and I finished work at 5 and I fell asleep for 3 hours and texted my coach and I just said, "Really sorry I didn't make it down. I'm in the grips of it at the moment. My eating, sleeping, and exercise is gone. I'll be back for the weekend, but I'm not in a good place." And I think when I'm alone and by myself, I am either all systems go, or I've got nothing. I need to have a sleep. And depression napping is very much my go-to. My housemate has picked up cues now. It's like, the back cushions have been taken off the sofa. Fraser's been sleeping in the day, and he'll check in with me, and things like that. So it's not often that I get to a space of quiet internally. It's almost never when I'm at home. I need to be out somewhere doing something physical, kind of mind-body connection type thing. Hiking, jogging, walking, sailing, like various things where just if I've got something in my hands and I can't afford to think, that's when I get there. And I've always associated that with hiking, where particularly with the challenges we do when you're exhausted. I mean, one year Fergus Crawley tried to do a vertical marathon, do 32 back-to-back summits of Ben Nevis. Madman. I joined him for 3 of them and got to the start of the 3rd one and I could not feel my knees. And I was like, I can't afford to think about anything other than where my next foot goes, because I will fall over and hurt myself. And it's in those moments when you can't think that I get that clarity. I'd love to get to a point where I can just sit in my bedroom and, I don't know, breath work or meditate my way to it, but I'm not there yet. But okay. I'd like to try.
I feel like stuff like that with music as well, for myself personally, I can't talk on Joe's behalf, is having loud music on allows me to almost not be in my head sometimes. And it's a distraction. And I know it's a distraction, so I actively try not to and try different things. But that's a massive coping mechanism for me, is say I'm sitting on the train and there's no connection, I need to have loud music on, otherwise my thoughts are pinging and I'm like, oh, I did this earlier, or I'm not feeling good with this person here. I always try and numb myself with stuff, and now I'm trying to accept it a bit more and being like, Tom, I know what you're doing here. I know you're going to put your loud music in now, and I know you're going to try and distract yourself on some video game, which you don't need to do. Yeah. Sit and actually try and think about it, or go out for a run or something. I'm trying to actively do that more, but that is really hard to do as well at the same time.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things that relate to that. One of them is Fergus again. Clearly this man's living in my head rent-free today. But one of Fergus's running videos where people are like, oh, what music do you listen to when you run? What do you recommend? And he starts the video and he goes, I'm Fergus Crawley and I don't listen to music when I run. And he was coaching me virtually when I was getting ready for the mountain. And he said, try running without your headphones, because you will run in step with your heart rate and with your breathing instead of in the tempo of the song you're listening to, and you'll be more consistent and you will run better. And I do not like running. And he was absolutely right. You know, when I have my running playlist on, unless you've curated a running playlist that's all the same BPM, mine will be like, it'll go from, I don't know, Zach Bryan to Avicii in the space of 30 seconds. And I'll go from sort of jogging through my tears to like jumping through the air. And you're getting faster and slower and faster and slower. So I started running without headphones, and I found it made a real difference. I spent my runs getting some real mental clarity, and I could think through things and have like a full-on conversation with myself in the same way that you do, you know, rose-tinted glasses after I wish I'd said this to that person at the party instead of that. I could have the whole conversation over the course of an hour's run, come home and go, I've solved that problem, rather than when I had music in and it was block out. And then earlier this year, I lost my headphones. I lose headphones all the time. And I can't for the life of me remember why, but I just couldn't be bothered to get some new ones. And it was about the same time. This is terrible. It's about the same time that whole meme about like raw dogging an EasyJet flight was doing the rounds on the internet. Like, just raw dogged my flight to Dubai, sat in my chair instead at the back of the seat in front of me for 8 hours. No snacks, no drinks, no music. And my friend said, are you not going to get some more headphones? And I said, no, I'm raw dogging my commute for the next 6 months. And I would sit on the district line from Richmond to Blackfriars with no music, just absorbing whatever was going on around me. And I would either read or I would sit in absolute silence. And I bet if people were looking at me, they were like, this guy's weird. It was so yeah, exactly. Just I became obsessed with people's shoes. It's like, it's all I can look at. I can't look them in the eye. And it was bizarre how much calmer I felt just by sitting with my thoughts for an hour. And people talk a lot about cognitive behavioral therapy. It's something that I've tried before. I think it's got some real merit of the whole see your thoughts passing through, you know, if they're kind of a moving motorway of thoughts, see them, appreciate them, know that they're there. If it's something that's bothering you, interrogate it a bit. You know, is this a helpful thought? Is this actually doing me any favors? If not, let that one go. But just appreciate that the thoughts are there, and don't let any of them kind of park in your car park for too long. Get them back on the motorway and let them go. And I think without trying to, it was a bit of that. You know, I'd sit on my commute and something would pop into my head. And rather than kind of, you know, when you have thoughts between scrolling or you have thoughts between songs and kind of going, oh, I'll think about that one later, or I don't want to think about that right now. By forcing myself to think about things, I'd kind of interrogate it, think about it. Do I care about this? Maybe, maybe not. Let it move on. And yeah, no headphones.
Yeah.
Would recommend. No beer, no headphones.
Noted.
As we're coming to the end of the podcast, it's absolutely flown by, which has been the best episodes when it does. I wanted to touch on Movember before we end, make sure we put all the Movember stuff in the show notes and make sure everyone who's listening to this or watching this gets involved as well. I've got a couple stats on Movember.
Yeah.
27% of men said they do not have any close friends or any friends at all to talk to, and 47% of men do not talk openly with friends about their problems, which comes back to the community point as well. I want to just talk on those stats and also a bit more about Movember, because a common misconception with Movember is it's just men's mental health. It's men's health as a whole. So can you talk a bit more on it?
So there's a third stat that goes well with those two, which is that 70% of men say they could be relied upon if someone needed to talk to them. So what we have is a disparity between 7 out of 10 men saying if someone needs help, they can talk to me. But then less than half of men saying if I had a problem, I'd talk to someone. So you've got all these guys who want to be pillars of their community, but they are literally pillars. They are all standing separately, like some sort of weird Greek, you know, mausoleum, Colosseum, Parthenon? My housemate who loves history is going to kill me. But yeah, we're all stood separately, not helping each other. And I think that, to your point, Movember is about all of men's health, and it started off being about prostate cancer. They then brought in testicular cancer. So prostate cancer being the biggest cancer for men over the age of 45. 1 in 8 men will get diagnosed in their lifetime. So, you know, in your rugby team, 2 of your mates on your team are probably going to get diagnosed with prostate cancer at some point in their lives. Testicular cancer being the biggest cancer for men under the age of 35. And most young men don't know that. They don't know that, that testicular cancer is the cancer. And so don't know about checking their balls. And then mental health being the most recent one. I think that there's there's a lot I could say on this, and I've been trying to figure out what my kind of message is this year for Movember. My message this year for Movember is all about Mo Bros finding Mo Sisters and vice versa, because that's what we do at Mo Rugby. We've got to get more comfortable advocating for men's health in particular, right? I think that we are comfortable, or getting more comfortable, talking about mental health, right? But a lot of people exclusively associate mental health with stories like mine, with depression and suicide and maybe anxiety. They don't associate it with, I've got prostate cancer. It's resulted in some pretty severe sexual well-being changes. It's resulted in some pretty invasive surgery. I feel like less of a man now. You know, they don't associate it with, I've had testicular cancer. I've lost a ball. I feel like half a man. You know, they don't associate it with, I found a lump, or I know something's wrong, but I don't want to tell anyone about it because it's a bit embarrassing. So I'm not going to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
And I think that in the same way that we need more men to be advocates of women's health causes, like breast cancer awareness, like Bloody Good Period, some fantastic causes that men need to be comfortable talking about with their female friends. Women and men as a whole, we all need to be a bit more comfortable talking about men's health problems. The biggest ones are the ones that Movember combats, which are prostate, testicular and mental health, because healthcare has got to respond differently to men and women. We have different ways of talking about things. We approach these things differently. We do things about them differently. And I think that this whole thing of, you know, men not feeling like they have anyone to talk to, there are lots of men around there, lots of men around to talk to. And a lot of those men want people to talk to them. So the first step is just starting the conversation. And Movember's acronym for it is ALEC, which is they developed with Are You OK? There are various ones. I mean, I'm a qualified mental health first aider. They've got ALGE. There's lots of different acronyms, but ALEC's the one I find easiest. And ALEC starts with ask, and it is just ask. It's one word. It's ask. If you want to add to it, it's ask twice, because you say, hey, how's it going? People say, yeah, good. How about you? Ask twice, but just ask. There's never a perfect time. There's never a perfect place. You're probably not the perfect person. You know, there might well be a bunch of other people that this person wishes had asked, but it happens to be you. But by asking how someone's doing, you open a door to be able to have that conversation. You know, if men feel like they don't have anyone to talk to, someone needs to talk to them. And when you talk to someone about how you're feeling, you then open the door for them to talk back the other way as well.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of men are that man, that 7 in 10 who wants to support other people, but probably doesn't want to be supported themselves. But if I go to Joe and I say, you know, Joe, how's your week been? Like, I've noticed you've been a bit quiet lately. Is there anything you want to talk about? And he talks to me about how he's feeling. We develop a sense of psychological safety in our friendship that we didn't have before, which then A, gives Joe permission to ask me how I'm feeling when I next see him, and B, makes me feel more comfortable, like he's invested some trust in me. I can afford to invest some trust in him.
Yeah.
And that goes with men and women as well. This does not need to be, and it should not be, men supporting men, right? I think that we've got to get a bit more savvy as to how we have these conversations, and mental health literacy and understanding that men and women have different ways of talking about their well-being is really important. And that's a big part of what the Movember campaign does. You know, we pump money into this campaign that's quite a blokey campaign about moustaches, and, you know, it's got motorcycles and rock music and stuff like that to try and get men to not feel so weird about talking about how they're feeling. And I think it starts with asking, because once you've asked, it's easier to ask someone than to tell someone, but once you've asked them, they will ask you, and you'll probably feel more likely to tell them, you know, if it's an ask-tell scenario. So yeah, it's a crap statistic, and we need to do better, really. Strength in numbers, right? You know, being a strong man is not being the pillar who doesn't talk to anyone, and, you know, I'll support anyone who wants me. It's learning how to interlink a little bit. But campaigns like Movember will improve that. You know, events like the Mo matches at Richmond on the 23rd of November will help that. And the rugby players from Mo Rugby, the Mo Bros and the Mo Sisters in their clubs across the country, doing their silly things for Movember, talking about it with their teammates, using Movember as an excuse to talk about health, right? Yeah. Because we often need an excuse to talk about things. Hopefully is going to make more men feel like they have someone that they could turn to.
I wanted to quickly point out one thing. Is you mentioned the Mo sisters. What do you think? Because for every guy listening to this, or for us, there's a woman involved, whether it be their mum, sister, partner, whatever. What do you think girls can do differently, or the signs to look out for men that they might be listening to this, watching this, and they know that their partner's dad, brother are struggling?
Great question.
Yeah, so there are a few signs that you can use to spot mental well-being going downhill, particularly for men, but in general. One of them is doing less of what someone enjoys. So if you know that your partner has a particular hobby that they love and they're not doing it as often, like me skipping training, just ask them. Just A of Alec. The rest of it is listen, encourage action, and check in, by the way. We should get that put up on the screen. If they're turning up late for things or they're not showing up, maybe you've set a date with someone and they keep moving it. You'd be tempted to think, oh, they're a flake. Probably struggling. I move things around a lot when I'm not coping very well. I've gotten a lot more open about telling people. I'm going on a date tonight, which is unusual for me.
Nice.
And I know the person relatively well, so I messaged her yesterday and said, I feel like I ought to let you know, I don't intend on moving this, but I'm having a really rough week. And I just need you to know. I don't know why, I just feel like I need to tell you.
Yeah.
And we're still going to go out for dinner, but it's good for me that she knows. So, moving things, taking less care of themselves. Every man looks like they're taking less care of themselves during Movember. We've all got silly facial hair. I'm talking more things like people love to go, oh, I'm sleeping terribly at the moment. It's almost like a competition these days, isn't it? How late can you stay up? If you've got a friend or a guy in your life who's not sleeping, ask them how they're doing. Someone who is more angry or aggressive more often. And I think this and the last one, which is people who are showing more signs of self-destructive behavior, are a really key part of the conversation for most sisters, because a lot of the pushback that I get around involving women in a men's health cause is, well, why would I want to advocate for men, right? Like, a lot of the content that we see on social media is that men are bad, right? Men are the perpetuators of gender-based violence. Men are the perpetuators of rape. Men are the perpetuators of war. All of those things are true, right? I can't refute any of that. Why do men do terrible things? There'll be lots of reasons, but one of them will be that they're feeling bad about themselves. And I think that the more that we can encourage people to see things like, this man's being more aggressive than usual. And I'm not talking the extremes. I'm not talking about things like domestic abuse. Like, that is obviously a call it out for what it is and speak to the police. But if you've got a boyfriend who plays rugby and he's more frustrated than usual, he's going out on game day and going, I really want to hurt someone today. That might be a good thing, but it might be worth saying, you're doing all right.
Yeah.
If you've got a guy friend who likes to drink, but they're out more than usual, they're the last one out, they're maybe using illicit substances more than using them at all or more than they normally would, ask them if they're okay, rather than going, that guy's an angry person, that guy's an aggressive person, that's a loose bloke, I don't want to be anywhere near him. Sometimes just saying, are you all right? Will open up, A, a conversation that helps them, and B, resolve the situation, right? A lot of the times, men feeling the need to be violent, feeling the need to be aggressive, feeling the need to go overboard with substance abuse comes from not being able to talk about things, and then, like me, wanting to forget about themselves. So if women can spot those signs and then just ask, not try and be an expert on it. And this is the biggest thing about Alec, that he is encourage action. It's not give advice.
Yep.
And this kind of comes back to your thing about giving advice to my younger self. I would ask him questions. And it's a big part of mental health first aider training. They say, do not give advice. You are not an expert. You are not a qualified physician. Okay. Encourage some action and explore someone's options, but do not give them advice. Rather than saying, have you been to the GP about this? Have you spoken to anyone about this? That's a good way of doing it, rather than we've all had what we perceive as the nagging person in our life going, you need to go to the doctor. Have you gone to the doctor yet? Or you need a therapist. Have you ever been told that? It's a great feeling. Asking someone questions, letting them solve it themselves is a really good way of doing that. And I think just letting men know that they matter. There can be a duality of man, right? Men aren't either the good guys or the bad guys, right? We don't have to either be the person who perpetuates war, violence, and sexual assault, or the knight in shining armor who's the perfect man, right? All men have all men inside them in one way or another. And the more that we can just appreciate each other, pay each other compliments, talk to each other about our feelings, let each other know that it's okay to have an off day. I think that men aren't good enough at supporting men in doing that. So women have to be able to step up and help us in the same way that, unfortunately, due to the way that the patriarchy operates, women advocating for women's health isn't going to solve women's health problems.
Yep.
Right. You're not going to get your free tampons in the toilets at work unless a man somewhere in the food chain agrees to it. Right.
Sure.
And we can both achieve so much more by advocating for each other's causes, in my point of view.
Agreed.
So yeah, and I think, find a Mo bro, find a Mo sister. That's what we're doing at work this year. That's our campaign. If you're a man who's fundraising for Movember or growing a moustache, find a Mo sister. And at Mo Rugby, we've got a lot of Mo sisters who are going to go find a Mo bro. They're finding someone to pair up with who, for the month, they'll fundraise with, they'll support, they'll talk to. And what would be lovely is if, after Movember that continues and every Mo bro feels like they've got a Mo sister in their life so that they do have someone to talk to.
That's awesome.
Amazing, mate.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much for your time.